Black CEO kicked out of luxury hotel she owns 9 minutes later, she fired the general manager. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Guests like you don't belong in our VIP lobby. Those words weren't a slip of the tongue. They were delivered like a command firm, confident, as if rehearsed in front of a mirror over years of service. Heather, front desk manager of the Crystal Heights Hotel, didn't blink. She stood tall, back straight, shoulders squared, uniform crisp, collar stiff, voice sharp like the marble wall behind her. No whisper, no apology, no hesitation. She spoke loud enough for the entire lobby to hear, from the business guest holding a champagne glass near the window to the tourist couple waiting for their luggage. Above them, the crystal chandeliers slowly turned in the even cold air. Each light reflected off the white stone walls, as if illuminating what Crystal Heights called timeless elegance. At the center of that space, a black woman stood calmly, almost unnaturally so. Avery Jameson. About 50 years old. Petite figure in black slacks and an ivory blouse. Hair pulled back. No heavy makeup. No designer watch. Just holding a pale brown leather bag, the kind most would mistake as worn out, but in truth a custom handmade piece from Florence. She didn't step back, nor did she look surprised. Instead, she observed Heather as though she recognized her from somewhere, or perhaps just recognized the type she represented. From behind Logan, the security guard walked briskly toward the lobby. His black gloves dangled loosely in one hand. He glanced at Heather, a silent signal. No need to ask questions. Just act. That was routine at Crystal Heights. Reflex, even. Avery looked around slowly, thoroughly. From the marble pattern on the front desk to the way the female staff member at the concierge hurriedly lowered her eyes to her laptop when she noticed what was happening. A moment of silence among all the pretending not to see. Then Avery smiled, gently, as if something she suspected had just been confirmed. She said, "Are you sure you want to say that in front of every guest here?" Heather raised her eyebrows. Chin tilted slightly. "We reserve the right to refuse guests who do not meet Crystal's space standards." A well-rehearsed phrase, clear, intentional, and layered with implication. Avery nodded. Slowly, "So today, I've learned something new." Heather folded her arms, clearly feeling triumphant. She didn't know at that exact moment the woman standing in front of her had triggered the internal audit system. A coded signal sent from the slim metal bracelet around her wrist to Horizon's command center, the corporation that had acquired Crystal Heights just a few weeks ago. No one recognized the device, because they were never trained to recognize the most powerful person in the room when she walks in without a business card. On the 16th floor of the nearby Horizon Tower, a tech staffer named Marissa stared at a blinking alert on her screen. ALERT founder level override, Avery Jameson present, Crystal Heights branch. Marissa reached for the radio. "We've got a situation in the main lobby," she said, her voice slightly shaking. "Requesting direct line to the executive director. She's activated the alpha override." Back in the hotel lobby, Heather continued, still unaware that every word she was saying was now being recorded and broadcast to the entire Horizon Executive Board in 3 cities. You may rebook a room in the general guest area, but the VIP lobby isn't available to guests who don't reserve properly. The phrase "guests who don't reserve properly" slipped from Heather's lips like a blade wrapped in velvet. Smooth enough to dodge blame, sharp enough to pierce the soul. Avery still didn't take out her phone. She didn't argue. She simply asked, "And if I don't leave Logan?" The security guard stepped forward. Heather tapped her phone. "I'll need to notify senior management to handle this." A few guests started whispering. An older woman nearby shook her head. "That's strange. I swear I saw her in a Wall Street Journal article." A young college student live streams the scene, overlaying text on the screen. "VIP lobby, or very inappropriate protocol, watch this." Avery is still standing there, not moving an inch. Heather doesn't know it yet, but in this moment, the countdown has already begun. Not for a complaint call, not for an apology, but for a decision, one that will forever change how this hotel is run. And in just 8 minutes, Crystal Heights will no longer belong to those who dare judge a guest by their first glance. Avery Jameson, 50, doesn't need a business card. Her name is on contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The media calls her the hand that rebuilt the hospitality industry after the crisis. But that morning in the lobby of Crystal Heights, a hotel she had purchased just 3 weeks ago, no one recognized her. And that was intentional. No PR team, no media manager, no bodyguards, just her. A buttoned-up white shirt, crisp black slacks, flat leather shoes, hair in a tight bun, no heavy makeup. No logos, no VIP badge, no sound to signal that power was stepping across the imported French wool carpet. Crystal Heights was a symbol of exclusivity. A place where having money wasn't enough, you had to have the right kind. A world where staff were trained not to serve, but to sort. And it was in this very place that Avery wanted to test how the system she had just taken over truly operated when it didn't know it was being watched. Her method of observation wasn't like any CEO you've ever heard of. Not through reports, not through spreadsheets, but through the eyes of an employee when they saw her in a brandless shirt. She chose Crystal Heights because the place had a long, quiet history of discrimination, from their marketing photos to a faintly printed appropriate dress policy in the employee handbook. When Horizon Hospitality acquired the entire chain, Avery gave one instruction: keep the current staff. To see how they would treat power when they didn't know it was staring them in the face. And Heather was that opportunity. Heather, the front desk manager, wasn't someone who would kick someone out with force. She did it with a glance, with a smug smile, and with words no one could legally sue for but everyone felt deeply humiliated by. Heather didn't know Avery. She didn't need to. She just saw a woman of color walk into the lobby, no VIP badge. Didn't walk through the express crystal lane. Didn't wear the proper designer dress or blazer. To her, that was enough to be categorized as a non-qualified guest. When Avery provided a special internal reservation code, one encrypted exclusively for senior shareholders, Heather didn't check it. She didn't need to check. She simply asked one question: "Are you sure you're not at the wrong hotel?" a nearby guest overheard. He looked at Avery for a long moment, didn't say a word, but pulled out his phone and quietly started recording. Meanwhile, Logan, the young security officer, had already become familiar with Heather's signals. When she gave a subtle nod, Logan knew exactly what to do. No need to ask why. No request for confirmation. Just show up. And if needed, escort the guest out. He wasn't malicious, but he also didn't ask questions. Derek Langford, the general manager, was upstairs at the time. A man with a glowing resume, a Swiss hotel management degree experience, running resorts in Bali, Dubai, and Vancouver. But as he once said himself, premium service isn't for everyone. It's for people who know how to behave in the right place, at the right time, the right way. He said that during a staff meeting, Avery had reviewed the footage in her first week of taking over. She didn't forget, but she also didn't act, not yet. To reform something properly, you have to let the system expose its own dark side, she once told her senior assistant. Crystal Heights had a faint scent of bergamot orange in the air, a pricey detail, but one you'd easily miss if you weren't welcome here. White orchid arrangements sat in perfectly spaced triangles on the guest tables. Elevators had frosted glass walls polished every 2 hours. Everything was immaculate, except the one thing that mattered most: the way people looked at someone who walked in without a status symbol. Avery didn't come in to check in. She came in to observe not the guests, but the team she had just inherited. To see the lens through which they viewed the world. And more importantly, would they be able to recognize a founder standing right in front of them? By that point, the answer was already forming. And Heather had just confirmed the worst. With a single glance, no hesitation, Avery knew a test was now in motion. And if her instincts were right, then within 10 minutes, Crystal Heights would have to change from the reception floor all the way up to the executive suite. Avery stood calmly at the front desk, pulling a slim envelope from her leather bag. Inside was an internal reservation code, a string of characters issued only to the founder within the Horizon system. That code was not listed on any public booking platforms. It was a special key used to test service protocols, no intermediaries, no prior notice. Heather, arms still crossed behind the desk, glanced at the code. Her face tightened. Her eyes shifted from indifference to caution. "I'm sorry, this code is invalid," she said flatly. Then added a line, soft as air, but heavy as stone. "Guests like you are not on Crystal's list today." A bead of sweat slid silently down Avery's temple, not from heat, but because something familiar had just happened again. No surprise. No anger. Only that old feeling, the feeling of someone who always gets checked, even when she owns everything. "Could you check again in the internal system?" Avery asked, still polite. Heather didn't respond. Instead, she leaned slightly to her right, signaling to Logan, the security staff. Logan, tall and broad in a black suit, approached like a shadow. His right hand hovered over the radio on his shoulder. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said. "I've been asked to escort you out of the VIP area. Your presence is affecting the experience of our other guests." Each word, like a blade honed on stone, hard, emotionless, rehearsed. Avery quietly produced another card, an internal ID issued to founders. Metal-plated silver, edged with the Horizon Executive Board's embossed seal. But Heather only glanced at it, didn't touch it, and gave a mocking smile. "What can you do? Who would you even complain to?" Then she turned her back, walking behind the computer as if it were all over. Avery didn't move. She just stood there, her hand still holding the card to her chest. That calmness was the silence of a coming storm. Footsteps echoed from the left corridor. Derek Langford, the hotel's general manager, had just stepped off the private elevator. Charcoal gray suit, purple silk tie, a shining watch on his wrist. "What's going on here?" he asked without looking at Avery. Heather stepped over and whispered into Derek's ear, quiet but just loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "She's not on the list." Refusing to leave the VIP lobby. Derek raised his head. At last, his gaze landed on Avery. A downward glance, fast, then slowing. "Could I ask you to leave this area, ma'am?" he said stiffly. Then turned to Logan, issuing a line like reading a script. "If she doesn't leave in 2 minutes, escort her out." A foreign guest sitting near the bar looked up. He raised his phone, turned on the camera, and softly told his companion in Spanish, "They're kicking a black woman out of the hotel." No reason asked. No ID checked. At the same moment, in the corner of the room, a young black student named Jasmine, live streaming her first vacation on TikTok, turned the camera forward. She frowned, then typed across the screen, "Do they even know who she is?" The viewer count jumped from 20 to 700, then 1,300 in under 30 seconds. Avery said nothing. She just took a deep breath and turned her eyes toward a security camera mounted on the ceiling. Here comes the mini twist. A barely visible motion, Avery gently tapped the face of her wristwatch. The signal light blinked 3 times in white. That action had a private code begin recording entire lobby system, plus activate executive surveillance. At the Horizon headquarters a few blocks away, an operations employee named Noelle spotted an unusual signal on her screen. A LART founder presence verified, Crystal Heights branch passive override active. Noelle immediately stood up and called executive legal. "We have an emergency signal from CEO Jameson herself," she said, voice trembling. "And she's being threatened with removal from the very hotel she owns." Back in the hotel lobby, no one knew that. They only saw a woman being denied, being humiliated, being pressured to leave. Logan had taken another step. Heather held her phone, apparently typing a violation report into the system. And at that very moment, another guest stood up. An African-American businessman dressed in a black suit looked straight at Derek. "Are you sure you want to throw her out without even knowing her name?" Derek paused for a beat. Avery just smiled softly. said nothing, offered no resistance. She had already done her part. 172 seconds since she was turned away. The clock was ticking, and justice was on its way. Avery didn't leave. In a space designed to make people feel small, she stood firm like a pillar. No retreat, no angry words. But with one subtle motion, her thumb gently slid along the edge of the thin watch on her left wrist. Everything changed. No one in the room saw anything unusual. But up on Horizon's executive floor, a control panel let out a sharp ping. Noelle, a security coordinator midway through a sandwich, immediately looked up at the screen. ALART founder presence confirmed CRYST. AAHEAG. HTS passive override, a CTIV. She swiftly typed a command, begin live surveillance, across all lobby camera channels. Dispatch urgent bulletin to executive command. On the security screen, a high-resolution image of Avery Jameson appeared. Noelle sighed, almost whispered to herself, "I can't believe it. They're doing this to her again." Down in the lobby, the tension tightened. Heather stared at Avery as if facing a bad joke. When Avery reached into her jacket and pulled out an internal encoded card silver with blue trim, a symbol reserved for senior shareholders, Heather scoffed. "You pull that off Google. You think it's that easy to fake an alpha internal badge?" She said it loud enough for a few people nearby to hear, intentionally planting doubt in the air. Jenna, a newly hired receptionist, sitting 3 desks away, quietly opened her onboarding folder, scrolled to the Horizon executive team list. Her eyes widened. She blinked multiple times, unable to believe what she was seeing.
She leaned toward Heather and whispered, "Her name is Avery Jameson. I saw it clearly in the first week training file."
She's the founder of Horizon. She's the new owner of this hotel. Heather didn't flinch. She turned to Jenna and hissed through clenched teeth, "Shut your mouth. That's just a rumor." Then rapidly typed a few commands into the system, as if her keyboard speed could prove her right. The first emotional drop hits. Jenna backed away. Head lowered, hands on her lap. Eyes full of conflict, torn between the truth she just discovered and the pressure from a superior who had just silenced her. Derek turned back, face flushed, frustrated. The scene was dragging on. He waved his hand. Logan called 2 more from security. "Escort her out." Politely but firmly. Logan hesitated, hand on the radio, but didn't press the button. Avery simply looked at him. Not angry, not pleading, just a quiet gaze that made it impossible for him to send the signal. 1 second, then 2. Logan lowered his hand from the earpiece. Derek barked, "What are you waiting for?" Logan replied quietly, "It's just something doesn't feel right, sir." Another emotional drop. For the first time, an employee chose not to comply, immediately sensing something beyond the standard procedure. Avery didn't turn to them. She looked up at the security camera mounted on the ceiling. Her eyes spoke to the system itself, not needing anyone in the room to understand. Then she spoke, slowly, deliberately, as if carving her words into stone. "I don't need to be recognized. I just need them to remember what's right." On the executive floor of Horizon, the alert had just been received. FOUNDEROVERIDEIUUEST, a VERYJEI EMSONCO NFERM EDCYSTILHEIG HTC. Emergency transfer of operational control initiated. A legal officer rose from his desk. An operations manager opened a case containing the master admin codes. An urgent internal executive meeting began to form, and everything centered around one unfolding event, happening right now in the lobby of the hotel they just acquired, where the founder was being ejected from the very place she built. Back to the lobby. The whole room froze. Several guests stood up. A foreign man finished recording the first clip and started uploading it to Twitter. The first hashtags were typed Blaxio Cristalbius, Horizon Hospitality. Heather still didn't realize the storm about to break through the lobby. She stood confident behind internal policy, with trained eyes designed to categorize people by outward appearance. She had no idea that right now, the entire hotel's back-end systems, keycard security gate software access, were preparing for a complete override. Each stream of data surged like an underground current beneath the city, and Avery, standing motionless in the center of it all, had become the silent epicenter of a corporate reckoning. Derek, still thinking he held control, signaled again. I'm going to count to 3, but he never got the chance. Because the next second, a ping echoed from the terminal behind the front desk. Then every screen turned black. A single white line appeared. FOUNDER, OVERRID, EIE, a CT, IVA, TE, EMPORAR, YTRA, NSFERI, NPROG, ESSO, WNERSHIPUNDIREER, F, I see a TION. Immediately after, another soft ping sounded at reception. One screen flickered. Then another. Then every device across the lobby, from card readers' guest check-in systems to the door control panels, simultaneously shifted to security mode. The light on the card reader turned from green to blinking red. The Horizon logo spun against a black background along with the line SYSTEMLO, CKEADOVARIDA, EINIT, IAAE, ELEVA, ELFO, UNDAR, TLR, USTALPA. It felt as if the air had been sucked from the room. Heather, still behind the counter, began to step back. Her eyes darted around in disbelief. What's happening? She whispered. Her voice was no longer cold, it trembled. Derek Langford, phone in hand, tried to call upstairs, only to find his own screen black with a single message. EXECUT, IVACONTROLPR, IVILAGESREV, OKID. He stepped back. His face paled. Sweat began to gather around his collar. Suddenly, a female voice echoed through the building's internal speaker system. Calm, mechanical, and absolute supreme identity verification. Avery Jameson. Code-level founder, Trust Alpha. Transferring full operational control to owner. No background music. No lobby piano like before. Only the sound of heavy breathing and a truth now laid bare. Logan, the security guard, lowered his walkie-talkie. He backed away, eyes filled with regret. He didn't speak, but his right hand clenched as if trying to stop himself from bowing his head. Jenna, the trainee, spoke almost on instinct. I told you she's the founder. A powerful emotional drop hit the room. An elderly guest placed her hand over her heart and began to cry. She shook her head and whispered to her husband, they kicked out the very woman who created this place just because she didn't look like what they expected. Nearby, Jasmine, the college student live streaming on TikTok, trembled, unable to press stop. But the video kept going. The viewer count surged. 38-0. Then 72-0. Then 104-0. Avery didn't say much. She quietly pulled out her phone, turning her back to the counter. No need to look at Heather. No need to call Derek over. No need to accuse. No need to raise her voice. She simply opened the internal app and spoke one sentence as simple as closing a book. I want to terminate General Manager Derek Langford. Effective immediately. Derek went pale. He stepped forward, almost stammering, wait, I think there's a misunderstanding here. If I had known earlier, I would. Avery turned around. There was no anger in her eyes, only certainty. That's exactly the problem, Mr. Langford. You didn't know. And you never cared to. He was about to respond, but a beep came from his wristwatch. His access icon changed from green to gray. His management account was frozen. The executive-level exit was locked. Every ounce of power he had held vanished in a single command. Heather now stood frozen. She didn't know whether to apologize, deny, or run from the place she had just turned into a public courtroom with her own hands. Jenna gently placed a hand on Avery's arm. "I'm sorry for what happened," Avery nodded. Her eyes softened. "You did nothing wrong, but you chose to see. That's the difference." The final emotional drop hit with quiet force. A middle-aged bartender, maybe in his 40s, stepped forward. "Ma'am, I'm just the cocktail guy, but if you need someone to walk through the training procedures again, I'm willing." Avery placed her hand on his shoulder, nodding. "I might call you first." Near the hotel entrance, a group of tourists had just walked in, frozen in their tracks at the strange scene. Everything in the lobby, from the lights, the voices to the atmosphere, was filled with something they never expected to find in a five-star hotel: justice. Not through force, but through clarity and order. Avery Jameson didn't need to say anything more. She turned and walked toward the service elevator. As the doors opened before stepping inside, she paused for a beat. She looked around the lobby, now no longer the arrogant showroom she had purchased 3 weeks ago. And without anyone needing to announce it, she had taken it back. Not with a scream, but with truth. That noon, everything at Crystal Heights changed. Derek Langford, who once thought himself the face of class, was terminated on the spot. All internal access revoked in under an hour. Staff badge, email access, executive account, security clearance, everything locked simultaneously. No paperwork. No explanations. Heather, the front desk manager, and Logan, the security staff, were placed on temporary suspension pending investigation. No one objected. In fact, Logan was the first to hand in his badge and quietly told Jenna, "I should have listened when you warned me." But Avery didn't come here for revenge. That very afternoon, she called for an emergency meeting with the entire Crystal Heights staff. No prepared speech. No slideshow. Just Avery in simple clothes, standing in the middle of a conference room, with nearly 70 employees seated around her, unsure of what was about to happen. She began with a story not about today, but about 30 years ago. "When I was a college student," she said, "I once went to a hotel in Texas. I didn't have a nice suitcase. I wasn't with anyone. I just wanted to ask for the price of a night." She paused. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was clear. The receptionist didn't respond. He just laughed and pointed me toward the laundromat next door. Because he thought I worked there. The room fell completely silent. A few people bowed their heads. A few stared straight ahead, unblinking. "I will never forget that feeling," Avery continued. "Not because I was turned away, but because no one there saw anything wrong with it." 1 week later, Crystal Heights temporarily closed for restructuring. When the hotel reopened, there were no new signs, no logo changes. But everything inside was different. A new program was launched: Service Without Judgment. The program was piloted at Crystal Heights, aimed at retraining the entire team, not just in skills, but in awareness, emotion, and the true essence of hospitality. Jenna, the intern, the only one who dared to speak up, was appointed as the culture coach for that location. She didn't wear a blazer. She didn't hold an executive iPad, but her courage in that moment had changed the entire course. At the program's launch event, there were journalists, media, and representatives from the hospitality industry. Avery didn't stand on a tall podium. She stood alongside the bartenders, the housekeeping staff, wearing a warm, unassuming smile. When asked why she didn't enforce harsher public disciplinary action, Avery simply said, "Punishment creates fear, but transparency creates change." In her brief speech afterward, her final words left the room as silent as a lightning strike. "Luxury doesn't come from building materials. It comes from how we respect the ones who walk through our doors." The story ends with an image of Avery walking out of the hotel. No television cameras. No cheering crowd. Just a few staff bowing their heads, a few guests in the lobby, turning to watch her leave. Not because of fame. Not because of power. But because they knew that woman had just stopped a broken cycle that had existed for far too long, with nothing more than her silence and her strength. She didn't just preserve a hotel. She opened a new door for justice.